Okay, we're going to skip the introductions today. Go right to the material. This is Hashem. Okay, we started talking about Gula last week, redemption, and from a more theoretical understanding approach to the topic and what it actually means, and we're a little bit further today, and the more specific components of Gula, what we're after, what we're trying to accomplish. I'm going to be reading from some notes, so I'll be looking at the notes as opposed to straight into the camera here, and then we'll go from there, and then hopefully tie it back to what's going on today eventually and what we need to be doing. So I started talking about the Aleph last week. Now, in a sense, it sounds kind of like he's talking about war. Real redemption, miracles from Egypt, and everything was so dramatic, and everything was so physical, and so obviously very, very spiritual too. But I mean, miracles for sure is spiritual. But it was people enslaved, and they had to be freed from slavery, physical slavery, and they had to be brought to Mount Sinai. But this sounds more like a mathematical equation on paper, but the truth is science works very much the same way as well. Science starts off being very theoretical. The physics are very theoretical, and there's so much that we benefit today technologically because of things that were actually, they began as theory. They just, that's the brilliance of the scientists and brilliance of the technocrats, that they can take this material, these ideas, and figure a way to apply it in everyday life and bring it from potential to actuality. And we become the recipients of this, not even understanding half the time what the theory was behind all of this, we get used to the fact that everything just seems so physical. So the same thing is true with redemption and exile, and all these different things, because it sounds like everything's just so physical. And likewise, a redemption, Moshe goes down, and he speaks to Pharaoh, and he says, "Let my people go," and all things unfold with the plagues, and then eventually we get out of Egypt. Yehudis, you might want to mute your microphone if you can hear me.
Yeah, I think I need to. Somebody was tailgating me. Sorry. All right, I'm gonna mute. Go ahead.
Anyhow, so this is the theory, but it is really what's going on. This is what's going on behind the scenes, directing what's actually happening in everyday life. What's going on today? I mean, on one hand, you've got what happened on Simchas Torah, and you have the terrible atrocities, and then you have hostages today, and you have soldiers that are being killed today. I was just told about a terrorist attack in Yerushalayim, and this is all very real and very concrete. It just seems very, very manual, very animalistic, even to a large degree. But there's something that God's after. He's behind it all. There's no ein od milvado, means nothing's happening that's random. Everything is according to this master plan. No matter how it seems that things are not being controlled, they're just like popping up here, popping up there. This is happening. This is, it's all because of some ultimate master plan that even goes beyond the world to come. I mean, the Kabbalistic Sforim talk about what they call the Tachlis Acharon, the final purpose, how everything began from that place, and everything's going back to that place eventually, and everything that's going in history is just to support and help and all the Nahaga, all the divine providence, whether it's revealed, whether it's hidden, whether it's general, whether it's personal. It was all for that purpose. It's all to get us back to where we have to go at the end of everything. So, in the end of the day, it's the script that really matters the most. And the same thing is true. You find a bunch of actors on a stage acting at a play, and everything, they get into the part, they go into character, and they do whatever they can to make it as real as possible. But if someone forgets their line or someone makes a mistake about something, so they get the script, they read the instructions, and they try to get an understanding what the playwright had in mind when he was writing it and conceiving it. So ultimately, even though the play itself is the physical representation and manifestation of the ideas themselves, at the end of the day, it's the ideas that direct everything, that are causing everything to happen the way they're happening, certainly on stage, and all of life is a stage, and certainly in our world. So it helps to know those principles, not just in terms of chizuk, which people need a lot of today in general and all through history, to reinforce them, to make them feel strong, that they can cope with the situation and live through it meaningfully, despite all the lack of encouragement to live meaningfully. So we spoke about, I'm not sure, I actually forget how far we got last week, but I'm going to go through this first section a little bit quickly because it is the basis of what's coming up, but it's important to know. So the first thing we have to know is that the world was made with Nun Shorei Bina, 50 gates of understanding. What are the 50 gates of understanding? Understanding, we understand. That makes perfect sense. But basically, everything is about the light of God. It's all divine light. Everything that exists is because of divine light. Everything that happens is because of divine light. Everything that we experience is all a function of divine light. Even though everything can become very physical and seem so unspiritual, even the evil cannot exist if it's not a function of divine light. People have a difficult time wrapping their heads around it, that someone as evil as Hitler or Hamas, that they can, in fact, they can exist on divine light, that their bodies exist as a function of divine light. It seems like there should be another light, some other evil light in creation that creates the evil people. How can God participate in the existence of people who are so bad and do such terrible things? So it's not really that complicated a question once you understand again the purpose of creation, where everything is going and how God runs things. And I will be shocked to find out how everything makes sense in the end. In the meantime, it's not so easy. So that's why we have expressions like Gams Latova. All that God does, he does for the good. Because basically, it's an emunah. We just have to trust God for it because we can't see. And we know how much what we know plays a role in how we perceive reality. And how we perceive reality directly affects how we can evaluate a situation and how to respond. So the world was made of Nun Shorei Bina. It just means that there's something called the 50 gates of understanding, and Kabbalah explains what they are and how we arrive at 50 and what's so meaningful about them. But these are channels, if you will, for divine light that come into the world. They're really the basis of Torah. The whole point of these 50 gates of understanding is to act as a means to give the light of God over to us, that God wants to share his light, reveal himself to us, but also based upon where a person's spiritually holding, because one person's level of spiritual growth is not the same as somebody else's, and they might not be worthy or able to experience that level of divine revelation. So there has to be levels. So you have 50 gates, there's 50 different levels, 50 different ways for the light to be filtered down to us. And that's the basis of reality. That's the basis of our world. Now, Kabbalistically, it corresponds to the sphere of Bina, which is in a sense, is the mother of our creation, so to speak. But essentially, the main thing we need to know is that this is the basis of reality. This is whether you understand it, whether you don't, whether you're religious, you're not, you believe in God, don't believe in it, doesn't make a difference. This is the reality. Everything is working through these 50 gates of understanding. Why is this important? We'll see in a second. Okay, but that's the first thing it says. Now, if you look at the Torah, right, and this is a long introduction to get to the point, but we have to go this, from square one to build. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense. The Torah says, after God made the world with those 50 gates of understanding, so then he made man. On the sixth day of creation, he made man. And the Torah tells us that when he made man, he made him b'tzem Elokim, in the image of God. And everyone knows that. I mean, the whole world knows that. The Gentiles know that. That's not a new idea. Made in the image of God. Now, what does it mean to be made in the image of God? That's a different story, because God's not physical and man is. God is unlimited. He's infinite and man's not. So how can you be made in the image of God? And what does it mean in the image of? What's the term image mean over here? So the basic explanation that we have as part of our tradition that makes the most amount of sense is that just as God uses intelligence to discern truth and to act upon truth and to reject evil, he makes decisions. That's what an Elohim is. In fact, in Hebrew, the term Elohim, which means God, is also used for angels. They're also called Elohims because it says that Yaakov, when his name is changed, he fought with Elohim and man, and you survived. Elohim there does not mean he fought with God. It means he fought with an angel. And also the Torah says that a judge is also called Elohim because is supposed to use his intellect to discern truth, to make decisions. So it means that man is made a discerning being. He's supposed to be able to discern things. Animals don't really discern like that. I mean, they're like computer programs, as much as cuddly and cozy, and as much as they're man's best friend, and we love them. And I am an animal lover for sure. You know, still, it's all instinct. They cannot override their instinct. They cannot override what they've been programmed to do. If a cat finds some food on the street and sees another cat down the street that's not connected to it in any way, starving, it will not say, as much as I want this can of tuna fish for myself, I'm going to share it with the other cat down there because that cat seems to be in worse position than I am. Animals don't do that. They'll take care of their young, and sometimes not even that. Human beings can override their instinct. They can discern a higher level of truth and go according to it, even though every part of their body is screaming, keep that sandwich for yourself. You're going to be hungry later on. We can still say, no, but it feels better. It feels righter to share that sandwich with somebody else who's less fortunate than me. So that's a godly thing. That's what it means to be an Elohim. So then what's the image part? So the Sforno says that we're created as a potential. In other words, not that man was made in the image of God, but rather man was made with the potential to be an Elohim. But you see, a baby can't be a discerning individual. Not even by bar mitzvah, when they're supposed to be a bar das, they're supposed to be intelligent already. They're still not, making even most of the right decisions. A lot of it is basically because that's what they're used to, and they're afraid to make the mistake. Even adults. Clearly, adults can remain children the rest of their lives and not make that transition to becoming an Elohim. It's a very special thing to get to. In fact, you just can't get there on your own. You have to do it a very particular way. So, for example, the Arizal in Shar HaGilgulim, the Gate of Reincarnations, which basically talks about, reincarnation, of course, but mostly about tikkun. It's all about rectification, how to go about personal rectification. In chapter 18, he mentions that the goal of becoming an Adam really is really the goal to become what he calls an Adam Shalem, a complete individual. To become an Adam Shalem means that you've reached that level of being an Elohim. You've done the work, right? You've gone through all the things you're supposed to go through. That's what Torah and mitzvahs are here to help us do. He talks about 3 specific things that, about learning Torah a certain way and eventually learning, Sod, Kabbalah. And because as a person accesses higher levels of Torah, they also access higher levels of their own personal soul. So the delving into Torah for all the right reasons, for the reasons of personal growth, not just to know something more spectacular to give over the Shabbos table, but because you want to understand God and his reality much more. So the Torah will help a person to gain higher access, or at least access to higher levels of soul. And the advantage of that is obvious. Not only do you become closer to God because it's like climbing a ladder. That's the ladder that Yaakov saw. You climb the ladder, but it's more to do with the fact that your spiritual capacity is expanded, which means you could accomplish a lot more to perfect yourself because you have more tools to do it, more spiritual tools to do it. So he talks about becoming Adam Shalem. So an Adam Shalem is obviously, the opposite of the opposite, because that's what we're supposed to be. So Mitzrayim, right now, this is an important point because Mitzrayim means Egypt. That's the way it's translated. But Mitzrayim does not mean Egypt specifically. It became Egypt because the first Mitzrayim was in fact Egypt. That's geographically, that's where it was. But Mitzrayim, actually, the word itself, it's 2 parts. The first part is Meitzer, Mem Tzadi Reish, which is a boundary. And the last part, Yud Mem of Mitzrayim, Kabbalah explains, almost all this comes from Kabbalah, right, is Yud Mem, which is 10 plus 40 equals 50. Oh, that sounds familiar. Where did I just hear 50, not too long ago? Oh, the Nun Shari Bina, the 50 gates of understanding. So Mitzrayim means boundary, And the Yud Mem means 50, which means the Nun Shar Bina, which means that Mitzrayim really doesn't mean Egypt. Mitzrayim means something that constricts, that blocks the light of the 50 gates of understanding. That's what it's doing. Now, that's not so hard to figure out what it means practically. If the Torah is our main access to the Nun Shar Bina, by learning Torah, you're accessing the light of the 50 gates of understanding. So it would mean that anything that, by definition, blocks the learning of Torah or blocks the proper learning of Torah, because you can learn Torah and not get out of it, it has to give to you because you don't have the proper traits. Right? You're not using it the proper way. You want to become famous. You want to become a big rabbi. It's like it has to be for this specific purpose. We call Torah Lishma. So Mitzrayim is any reality in any generation. Today, according to this definition, Egypt would not be Mitzrayim. On the contrary, just the opposite. Why? Well, not really just the opposite, but better. Why? Because the Mitzrayim of Moshe's time, back at the beginning, the first exile, was more like America today, meaning it was into materialism. It was into having fun. It was not. It was also idol worship. It didn't have the Quran yet. There wasn't Muslim where people could not walk around without wearing headdresses and things like that. They were immodest. Yosef had to be viceroy in a country that broke the laws of modesty. Look at his master's wife, what she tries to do with him in the end. That was Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim, Avram Avinu has to lie about his wife and call her his sister to avoid being murdered, because they took people's wives, but they didn't like to do adultery. So what they did instead was kill the person to avoid murder was no problem. Adultery was a problem. It's a little weird cheshbon, but that's the way they thought. So Mitzrayim at that time was so gashmi, it was so materialistic. Not like today. The Egypt of today is not Mitzrayim like that. Today there are a lot of similarities between the laws of Islam and some, not that many, and Judaism, because that's where they took it from. That's where they got it from. Just like Christianity too, they took it. Torah was the basis of all these religions. So today you have to look at the world and say, well, let's see, which country, which nation is the one that seems to be so materialistic, so into not religion, not believe. Because don't forget, Islam believes in God, one God. They happen to call it Allah, but they believe in one God. Ad kedei kach that the Rambam paskins, if a person happens to accidentally pray in a mosque thinking it's a shul, and don't think that's so strange, because there's a lot of shuls out there that look very much like mosque, because not the mosque itself, but inside the shul. The person gets confused, makes a mistake. Do they have to repeat their prayer? No, because they believe in one God. Not the same thing by a church. A church, you have to repeat your tefillahs because it's a different type of spiritual environment. So Mitzrayim, by definition, therefore, is any reality that is anti-Torah, is anti-spirituality, that blocks a person. And it doesn't mean that they actually put up a roadblock and say, if you learn Torah, we're going to kill you like the Romans did. It can just mean that life is so distracting. Or, for example, science comes along and says, no, we've proven that God doesn't exist. You don't need God for creation. And therefore, the creation story is probably just written by men and Bible critics. And whatever it is that deters a person from wanting to connect to God, especially through Torah, that's going to be called Mitzrayim in that generation, which is why the Haggadah says that everybody can and should say that they too have left Mitzrayim, because we all are doing it all the time. It doesn't have to be a nation even, or people. The nation people embody that reality, but it can be even television. It can be certainly the internet, certainly phones, and even if for a moment a person gets up and they should be learning, or they should be davening, they should be focused on Hashem. They get sloppy. And they look at their phone for 2 seconds. They look at their television or their computer because they're distracted. That's not only a Malakian, that's Mitzrayim, that's an Egyptian, that's a Meitzer Yam. That's how intricate it can be in everyday life. And certainly, if it's a temporary reality, it's not nearly as bad as being in a country where this is the Shita, this is the way of life itself. So Mitzrayim comes specifically against an Adam Shalem. An Adam Shalem is somebody who has left Mitzrayim. So the whole goal of Geula, of redemption is going to be to become an Adam Shalem. Okay? Now, this, interesting enough, and there's so many gematrias that so beautifully bring this out. I mean, remarkable gematrias that it's too hard to believe that they could be true, except for the fact that God did it this way, and that's why it works out. So, for example, I mean, it's a simple gematria, but it's actually still a remarkable one, and that is the fact that the gematria of Geula is equal to the gematria of Adam. Geula means redemption. Specifically, redemption means from Mitzrayim, whether it's Babylonia, whether it's Media, whether it's Greek, whether it's Roman, but it's Mitzrayim, right? That's why, by the way, Avram Avinu is only talking about one exile, even though the Medrash talks about 4 exiles and doesn't mention Mitzrayim, right? But Avram Avinu in the Bris Ben Besarim, the Pact of the Halves, he's only talking about Mitzrayim, not about Bavel or Media or Yavon, because there is only one real exile, and that is Mitzrayim. It's the one thing that stands between God and a person is Mitzrayim, that mentality, whatever form it takes. So therefore, Adam is somebody is going to be in redemption. The whole point of redemption, the whole reality of redemption is the fact of reality of becoming an Adam. If you do what the Arizal says to become an Adam Shalem, what the Torah says, we don't even need Kabbalah, what your Seichel says, if you do that which allows you to become an Adam Shalem, you will become somebody who's redeemed. You'll become a redeemed individual from Mitzrayim, because you will have gone past the reality of Mitzrayim. You've left it behind, and that will play itself out also in the physical world too. Meaning what? Meaning that it's possible to rise above the reality of exile that everybody else is going through. An individual, theoretically and practically speaking even, can actually rise to a level of becoming an Adam Shalem, so much so that they're not going to be affected by the exile that everybody else who hasn't made the transition is going through. Now, it's not a coincidence that also they have what's called a gematria katan that's equal to the same as emes. Emes means truth, right? Aleph, mem, tav. The aleph is the first letter of the aleph base. The mem is the middle letter of the aleph base, and the tav, of course, is the last one to say the truth. The aleph base represents the whole concept of truth, because Hashem made the world with the aleph base. But the aleph, mem, tav, you add them up. Tav is 400, mem is aleph is 1, the mem is 40, the tav is 400. You add those up, you get 445. That's the 441. That's the gematria of truth. Okay, but there's also what's called mispar katan, where you can reduce it to a number. It's called the small number, and you do that by taking the numbers themselves. 441, 4 plus 4 plus 1 equals 9. You do the same thing with Geula. And Adam, it's going to be 45, which means 4 plus 5 equals 9, meaning that not only it's completely logical, right? It makes perfect sense. That basically it would be that a person who's an Adam, who's left Mitzrayim, by definition, is going to be an expression of truth, of God's truth in the world. And that's the whole equation right there. Now you just have to fill in a lot of the details about how to do that and what does it mean in everyday life. So the Aleph, the letter Aleph, therefore, is the key to all of this, because it's the Aleph that transforms the word dam, which means blood, and blood represents the physical component of man. Man is a being made with a physical body and a soul. So the Aleph, because it's Aleph and the number is 1, and it's also like the word aluf, which means a chief. So therefore, it refers to Hashem, to God, in more than one way, because the Aleph itself is made up of 3 letters. All the letters of the Aleph base, except for the letter Yud, are composites of other letters in the Aleph base. So, for example, the Aleph has 2 Yuds, a Yud above and a Yud below. That's very important. We'll come back to that later on. And a Vav in between. If you add up those 3 letters, you have 10 plus 10 plus equals 26, which is the gematria of the Shem Havaya, which is Yud Ke Vav Ke. So in the Aleph itself, you have this reality of Hashem who's one, which is one of the reasons why the Torah begins with the base, not an Aleph, because it's too kaddish. And also we're going to see, because the Aleph is yet to be revealed, not the way it's meant to be. That's our job. is to reveal the Aleph. The base is already part of the physical world because it's brocha, which means two, multiplicity, and therefore alludes to the physical reality. But the Aleph, we'll see, is Kabbalah, but also is a higher level of consciousness. But the Aleph is the key. So the Aleph transforms the word dam into the word adam, which is the perfect balance of both the soul and the body. So that's why, strangely, right, the first plague in Egypt is the plague of dam, makas dam. Now, it's amazing how we just take things for granted, but the basic answer as to why that was the first plague is because it afflicted the Nile River, and since the Nile River was considered to be a god in Egypt, so God was making the point that there's no God here at all, right? And also the fish all died, and the whole miracle with the Jews drinking water from the same glass as the Egyptian who drank blood instead. I don't know why they're drinking from the same glass, but that's what it says, as if they could be the way. That's what it would have happened. That was reality. They didn't drink from the same glass, but that's part of the miracle. Fine. That's why the river was affected. But you can use kerosene too. There's lots of ways to poison a river. Blood is not, okay, so blood symbolizes life. Certainly it's very gross to see a whole river turn into blood. More than oil, more than something else. Fine, right? But the real reason was because the makos, the plagues, were not really principally for the Egyptians. If it was just about destroying the Egyptians, God was playing with power the entire time, but not for power's sake, for the Jewish people's sake. He was fixing us. The plagues were a refuah shlema for us. So therefore, every plague was an education. It was helping us to go from level to level. And the rabbis point out that before the first plague began, the Jewish people were holding on the level of Memtesh Shari Tuma, the 49th level of spiritual impurity, teetering on the brink of spiritual destruction. And that's when God began the plague of blood right there, to tell them that this is what you become. To be on the 49th level of spiritual impurity means that you're so materialistic, you're so gashmi, you're so out of touch with the reality of God, which is what Egypt was. That's the way they lived. That's what Mitzrayim means. That it's as if you have no soul anymore. So you can't leave Egypt like that. You're a part of the fabric of Egypt when that's the case. If you want to leave Egypt, you have to become more like oil and water. You have to become different in context and reality so that you can rise to the surface and leave it. But right now, you're mixed in there like everybody else. So what did Hashem do? He was Megali himself. He revealed himself. He revealed the Aleph in increments. 10 increments correspond to the 10 spheres, other things, but in increments. So the first plague was just to educate the Jewish people in the fact that they'd gone down to this level. It's time to turn things around. So in a sense, what God's doing is he's building the Aleph. He's reconstructing the Aleph, or at least he's like resuscitating it, because the Aleph is there. You can't live without a soul, so the Aleph has to be there. But it's like goisis. It's like close to death at this point in time. So it has to be resuscitated. So God took out the spiritual paddles, right? Said clear, and bring back the patient back to life again by showing more and more. And each plague, by the third plague, even the Egyptians themselves, who were so Memtesh Shari Tuma, were forced to say, Zeh Zuetzvel Elokim. This is the finger of God. If they could see it, that this is but not Hashem, that the power will say, me Hashem. Elokim, they admitted to. They understood this was no longer black magic. It had to be Elokim, right? But this is what the plagues were doing, one by one, rebuilding the Aleph, right? So if you do that, then not only do you add the Aleph to a dam and make it a dam, you also add the Aleph to the word goleh. A person who's a goleh is an exile. Someone who is an exile is someone in the level of dam, right? Now, if you add the Aleph to the Adam, then you also are adding the Aleph to the goleh, transforming the word into geula. So the Aleph is the key to redemption. Just to put it in context, that's what's going on today. All of what's going on right now, believe it or not, Hamas, they're doing their thing. In the end of the day, they're puppets. They don't have, questionable that they don't even have free will, right? They're puppets. They're Hashem's instruments to do something for the sake of the Jewish people. right? Yishmael itself, Yishma Kel, right? That God will hear. What? Them? No, us, because of all the problems it caused to us, like in Mitzrayim. Paro caused the problems. We called out. God answered, and redemption came. So everything that's going on is for this purpose, to rebuild the Aleph in the Jewish people. It sounds so trivial compared to what's we're going to find out. That all that real actual suffering and pain is just all to do with this. Because don't forget, this is what happened in Mitzrayim. Before this happened, they were suffering terribly for 116 years. This has gone on for a month, and even the state itself is only 75 years old. And that was 116 years of slavery and killing, putting babies into walls. So, and yet when the Aleph was built, they went out. They just walked out because the Aleph was rebuilt. That's how powerful it is. You know what's going on. And the truth is, we see it in everyday life too, but just don't recognize what's going on. But that's the Aleph. Not only do you transform the word into Gula and into Adam, but also the word emes. Without the Aleph, emes is just mace. Mace means dead, a dead person. A mace. You add the Aleph and you transform the mace into emes, which is life. So the Aleph is that transformative reality, which of course is Hashem, which is God. There's another place where Aleph makes a big difference. If you turn to the end of Parshas B'Shalach, after the Jewish people complained about a lack of water, the Yava Amalek. Amalek comes in a place called Refidim, attacks the Jewish people. They go to war against them. They beat them. The Jewish people beat Amalek, right? The most powerful parts of Amalek they destroy. Amalek does not get destroyed completely because we don't merit that yet. And then God, Moshe Rabbeinu on behalf of Hashem says that God has taken an oath against Amalek, to be at war with Amalek, be door to door, every generation until he's finally gone. And the way he does the oath, because when you take an oath, normally in halacha you have to hold on to a holy oath, say for Torah, prayer to Tefillin. Eliezer took the leg of Avinu because they didn't have those things in those days. And you take the oath because that gives it the cheshiv, that gives it the koyach to stay and that you'd be afraid to break it. So what does Hashem take? Torah is less holy than he is. So what does he take? So it says Yad al Keska. Really, it's Yad al Kisei Hashem Avaya. Yet my hand is on my throne. Kisei means chair, but in this case it means God's throne. So my hand is on my kisei. I'm taking an oath by holding on to the kisei kavod in Shemaim that I will be at war with Amalek until all the generations, to find he's gone. But the Torah doesn't say kisei; it says case. Chaf samach. Because, as Rashi explains, and also Hashem's name is only Yud K, missing the Vav K in the end. So, Case Ka, right? So Rashi explains, brings a little bit of obscure medrash. It says that this is God's way of saying that as long as Amalek is in the world, and you have to know what Amalek represents because obviously it's all tied to this, and we'll see God willing. But as long as Amalek's in the world, my kisei is not complete. What does it mean? I mean, is a leg missing from the kisei in Shemaim because Amalek exists? No. The kisei, in terms of Hashem, is perfect. It's complete. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's as if it's incomplete because we're incomplete. Because the whole purpose of creation is us, the Jewish people, to do his will, to reveal him to the rest of the world. That's our responsibility. And you see it comes at a very heavy price. We paid a lot for it, for not getting it right. But it's all part of that purpose of creation. So therefore, if we can't be who we're supposed to be, the Or Lagoyim, the light into nations, so God says, as if my kisei is incomplete. It's like a parent, right? A parent loves to give to their children. That's what gives a parent such nachas, is to be able to make their child happy. A healthy parent wants healthy children, and they want happy children because that's a part of being healthy. But what if the child misbehaves? So everybody knows you can't give a child rewards for misbehaving. It sends the wrong message. So a parent is forced to deny their child that bicycle they wanted to give to them, or that trip they're going to take, because it's part of chinuch, it's part of education, teach them right from wrong. But how does a parent feel? The parent doesn't they don't walk, big smile on their face. Doesn't affect me. I'm happy. I'm not punishing myself. I can go have my cup of coffee, my piece of cake if I want to. My child, he's crying, but it breaks the parent's heart. The parent is incomplete. If their children are suffering, a parent is incomplete, even though they're not incomplete, but they feel incomplete, as if something's missing from them. That's how much their child is a part of them. So, same thing, Hashem says, that since you're such a part of what I want from this world, that if you're not getting what you need to get and accomplishing what you need to accomplish, it's as if I'm not complete either. It's as if my throne's not complete as a result. And that's all because of Amalek, because Amalek is the cause of all this. You're falling for it. And therefore, so get rid of Amalek, and my kisei will be complete. And the Aleph does that, right? The Aleph is a source of that. Now, what's interesting, since we've gone down that path of Chof Samach, right? Right now, it just sounds as if the Chof Samach itself is just what the word kisei becomes when you take away the Aleph. Just like the word dam is the word you get with take away the Aleph from Adam, and the word Gola is because the Aleph from Gula is taken away. And Chof Samach is, But interesting enough that if you look at the month we just entered, you will notice it's spelled Chof Samach Lamed Vav. And for those who are familiar with other presentations we've had here about the importance of Lamed Vav, we know that Lamed Vav is the light that this is all based upon. Lamed Vav alludes to the Or HaGenuz, the light that God made on the first day of creation, and as Rashi and the Gemara explained, he hid away on the first day so that the evil people can't use it. And Chanukah, during which we light Lamed Vav candles, right, is a revelation of that light in the world once again. And likewise, there are 36 tzaddikim in every generation because their lifestyle projects this light into the world. So the Lamed Vav is always going to be an allusion to the revelation of this very special light that really principally is for the time to come in the Messianic era when the evil people are all gone. But you can access it, through Torah, through mitzvahs, through yourself, because your neshama comes in the same kind of light. If you do the work, if you make the effort to access it. So what about the Chof Samach? Well, we know the Chof Samach actually represents the concept of what we call kisui, right? So mechuse means it's covered. So the winter, which is Kislev, the darkness of the darkest time of the entire year, basically December, before the clock starts turning around, miraculously, there was a revelation of this brilliant light at the darkest time of the year. It was hidden away. The light it never goes away. It just becomes hidden. As it says, God hid it. So the Chof Samach alludes to hiddenness. So the Chof Samach of Kisei also alludes to a certain type of hiddenness like we're talking about here. Amalek, when Amalek is in the world, he causes a hiding of this light. So for example, a practical application is when someone will come along and say, science is proven, and again, I love science too. I learned it. This is one of the best examples we have today. When a scientist comes along and says that I can show you how you don't need God to make creation. I can show you how everything is natural and God doesn't have to be involved. That man made him up. That's considered to be blocking that light. That's an Amalekian approach to life. Even though you don't come from Amalek per se, you don't have to. Because Amalek, more than it was a people, just like Mitzrayim, Egypt became the embodiment of the concept of Mitzrayim. Amalek, the people, became the embodiment of the concept of Amalek. And Amalek, the gematria of Amalek, is 240, which is equal to the gematria of the word suffix, which means doubt. So Amalek, anybody who creates not just any doubt, but doubt specifically in the existence of God, the divinity of Torah, that's going to be an Amalekian thing. And how do we see this? Because the Zohar says in Parshas Balak that both Balak and Bilam, who attacked the Jewish people, they weren't even in the line of fire, who attacked the Jewish people, they came from Amalek. Their souls are rooted in the spiritual reality called Amalek. And in their names, if you combine their names, you get Amalek. You can spell Amalek, right? Ayin Mem Lamed Kuf. And the leftover letters are base lamed, which spells Bavel, which is the first place we went in exile. And the word Babel, as we see from the flood, Mabul, the Babel, to confuse, to confound. And that's what Amalek does. And that's what Bilak and Balaam tried to do. And we're still being affected by what they did back at the time in the desert, in Shittim. But that's what Amalek is. Amalek is anything which by definition, like Mitzrayim, stands in the way of Nun Shorei Bina, goes one step further, even goes the other direction by creating doubt in their authenticity altogether. So that is very important, because the Gemara happens to say that a person can be defined, can be understood through three things: Bekoso, Bekiso, or Picasso. Not Picasso the painter, Picasso, right? What does it mean? It means through their cup, through their purse or wallet, and through their anger. Meaning, these are three specific traits that tell you about a person. Now, the truth is, there's lots of traits that tell you about a person. So the Gemara just choose these three because they sound nice together, because they all share two letters, Chof Samach, the case of Kisei and all that. And Kislev. Is that why the Gemara chose it? There's others that work too, but these make a nice little Gemara statement we can make, or it's something specific about them. So as we said, the common factor, of course, is Chav Samach, which we said is the basis of the word Kisu, which means covering up, to cover something. What's interesting is the letters that they don't have in common, which is a Vav, a Yud, and an Ayin. You add them up, and the gematria is 86. And 86 is the gematria of Elohim and a Teva, right? That's the gematria. So what's it covering up? It's covering up the Elohim. What does it mean? How does the way I drink cover up Elohim? How does the way I act with my money cover up Elohim? How does my anger cover up Elohim? So basically, it's not so complicated to figure out. That when a person gets drunk, they act differently. They act uninhibited. The brain shuts down that part of the alcohol shuts down that part of the brain that allows us to have a certain amount of shame from the things that we do in public that perhaps we shouldn't do. So what happens basically is that a person gets drunk, they're acting out what's inside of them the entire time. If a person tends to have a gentle nature, in general, that's who they are. Whether they show you or they don't show you, they seem introverted. But if they have a gentle nature, they get drunk, they'll be much more overt about the way they behave, right? But nice, because they don't have it in them. If a person seems to be civil most of the time, but gets drunk and starts getting violent, it's because that's inside of them. They're violent inside. So the same thing is true about a person and God. If a person is a God-believing individual, they're real with the reality of God. It's through and through. They have a level of haskel, part of their intellect, part of their hashkafa, the way of looking at life. And they get drunk, they will reach out to God even more so, in ways that they would be too embarrassed perhaps to do in public, because it might look like they're trying to be too righteous. But uninhibited, I'm Purim, you see this all the time. People who are really working all year round to be close to God just go the extra steps, right? Uninhibited to become close to God on Purim too. But if a person is hiding a very not spiritual reality inside of them, pretending to be more spiritual than they actually are, that'll come out instead when a person's drunk. So that's drinking. When a person drinks and becomes inebriated, it reveals their inner content, because now the walls that hold it back for good or for bad are no longer there anymore. And therefore, it shows you whether or not a person is real with God or not. That's the Elohim. That's the hiding of Elohim that becomes revealed through that third, right? The second one, Kisa, money, is one of the best examples, right? My money is mine. God says, no, all the money belongs to me. I went to work for 6 days this week, and I worked hard to get my paycheck, and I negotiated a salary with my employer, and he signs a check based upon my hours, so it's my money I work for. God says, no, right? You did your avoda, which, you're not in the base medrash, so you're not learning Torah, you're not running around doing chesed, you're not a doctor in a hospital, you've got a job working in some office someplace, even on Wall Street, whatever the case, or the Bursa in Tel Aviv, whatever job you have, that's your, but that's got to be your avodas Hashem. There's no moment when you're not doing avodas Hashem, hopefully, right? And the money is a stipend that I give you to help you keep doing your avodas Hashem. And the test will be how real you are with that when you have to give tzedakah, when you have to be generous, you have to share, right? Sharing is caring. It's also showing how much you believe that God is the one who owns the money. It doesn't happen so often today anymore, but I remember as a kid going to the bank and taking out money, and the teller made you feel like you were taking their money. You almost felt guilty, you felt bad for actually withdrawing your money. In Israel, in the beginning, the banks were like that for completely. You had to remind yourself, that's my money, the cashier, the drawer there. Not all of it, I wish it was, but I'm asking for I'm not asking for someone else's money, my money. But the same thing is true, God does with us. God says, my money. Why are you acting if it belongs to you? Why are you acting as if you give it away, you won't get it back? The only mitzvah you're really allowed to test God is in the mitzvah of tzedakah. Meiser belongs to God anyhow. Taking off a tenth up to a 20, up to a 20th, that belongs to God anyhow. The meiser, the 20th already, the extra 10% is now tzedakah. But tzedakah means you're taking from your money and you're sharing with somebody else. You're allowed to give more than you can afford and say that God will give it back to me. It's the only place you're really allowed to test God in terms of bituch haramunah and things like that, even if you're not even on that level completely. That's because it shows how real you are with the fact that God is the source of all your livelihood. And the last one, kas, anger. Anger, basically, what's a person saying when a person gets angry? Injustice. It's not fair what you've done to me. And if I'm an innocent victim. What about Hashgacha Pratis? What about the fact that the Gemara says that no one lifts a finger or hurts a finger if it's not first decreed in Shemayim? Someone offends you, someone hurts you, someone damages you or your property, that's Hashgacha Pratis. It's all from Shemayim. Now, they have to answer to God why he chose them to do the bad thing, because that's their Avera. They still get the Avera. But between you and God, it's like, okay, God, I get that. I hear. There's a message here. Something about what's going on. I need to learn. Let me figure it out. So you may have an obligation to tell the person, listen, I don't know if you realized it, but you backed into my car, or you stepped on my foot, or you took my property, right? You should be careful about things like that in the future. That's between you and the person. That's your mitzvah of tochacha. But in terms of your mitzvah of believing that everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? There's no room for anger. The Gemara says that someone who gets angry is ki'ilu of devadah zarah, as if they're white worshiping idols because you're giving power to something that doesn't exist. And I always use an example that a person gets rear-ended by someone's car, for example, and you see people get out of their car and they're about to get screaming. What have you done? Why can't you drive more carefully? They're angry, right? But just before they can open their mouth, a booming voice comes down from Shemayim and says, "I caused that to happen," and you know it's God. So what do? You get angry? Well, why'd you do? No, it's like, oh, God said so. Okay. That's a different story. So that's the thing. A person gets angry because they forget, they lose touch with the fact that what just happened to them is hashgacha pratis. Now, again, there's a mitzvah to show anger sometimes, to make the seriousness of a situation known to a child or somebody, right? But not to lose your temper. Losing your temper, is something altogether inappropriate for obvious reasons. But these three things. But the real reason is what they're really telling us is not just who you are as a person, but who you are with respect to Elohim. We end up Yom Kippur by saying Hashem Hu Elohim 7 times to correspond to the 7 levels of Shemayim, because we're trying to drill it into ourselves. For 10 days, it was real and for the 40 days, including Elul, it was much more tangible. But now, Motzi Yom Kippur, the Shekhinah is going back to Shemayim, going back to the higher levels. We're drawing to a much more hidden, state of reality. But we don't want to forget this, because that's where all the mistakes, that's where all the Averas come from, is forgetting this. Hashem Elohim, 7 times to drive into us for every level of Shemayim that Hashem withdraws to. So that's what the Avos did. they drew God down into the world, and the other Rishayim pushed it back out again. It's all to do with the Aleph. It's all about the Aleph. The Aleph, that's what we're building. If we had built the Aleph, none of this would be going on. If we had the Aleph in our life, miracles would be happening all over the place. It would be a whole different level of reality. Hanina Mendoza says to his daughter, she lights Shabbos candles using vinegar and it burns. She's worried. It's burning. It's not that she's not, the vinegar is burning. And it's confusing to her because she knows that vinegar doesn't burn. So it's got to be a miracle. So he says, she says to her father, well, he sees that she's upset. And he says, what's the matter? She says, well, see for yourself. And he says, interesting enough, he says, well, the same God who commanded the oil to burn will command the vinegar to burn. And from the Gemara, it's clear it's already burning. So what are you telling me? What are you telling me? It's like, yeah, Abba, I know that. That's not the question I'm asking. I can see it with my own eyes that the vinegar is obviously God. I mean, I'm your daughter, right? Obviously I know that God is the source of everything. That's not my question over here. I'm just asking a question about like, why would he go ahead and do that? So the answer is the Shabbos candles, which is for a discussion for another time. Actually, it's a book I'm working on right now called V'Yechulu, about halfway through Or Hashem, but hopefully come out soon to help people appreciate Kiddush better and make more of the Kiddush and get out of it what it has to offer. But Shabbos too in general, just understand more what was going on Shabbos. And his answer back to his daughter is deeper. He's really telling her, he's saying that, no, you understand. When you lit those candles, right, you entered a reality called Shabbos. It's a higher level of spiritual consciousness on which miracles are more natural than nature itself. Again, a discussion for another time. But this is what it means to build the Aleph. And if we build the Aleph and we transform ourselves from, and it's a work in progress, it's all of life, right? We transform ourselves by going higher and higher and higher. Then we become an Adam Shalem. We will out of Gula just happens. The evil just disappears, just dries up. You don't have to even fight a war to do it. But if you don't do it, then you have to fight wars. You have to become very physical. Fight the enemy on his own turf, in his own way. Get miracles still, right? But if we can build the Aleph, we can limit the amount of physical involvement we need to use in order to be able to conquer the enemy, vanquish the enemy. But as we'll see, God willing, next week, the Aleph is just the beginning of the story. There's a Vav in there that we have to look at and understand better, because that's the key to who we're trying to be completely. So I'm assume that Mrs. Shamroth is not available to say goodbye. So I'm going to wish everybody a good Shabbos, a peaceful Shabbos, Besoros Tovos. All of our people, there should be no more suffering. To Klal Yisrael, the whole world should rectify itself, and we should be zeichet to reach this level of Adam Shalem, Gula Shlema, B'ezras Hashem, without any more suffering. Shabbat Shalom, and have a peaceful one.